Okay, hello and welcome to episode 5 of Caribbean Football Weekly on Reggae Boys Commentary. I'm Nathan Carr from the home of Caribbean Football, and I'm joined by usual co-presenter Santokie Nagu. Santokie, how are you doing on this fine Sunday evening?
I'm great, Nathan. I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, very well, very well, very well. It's worth pointing out to you guys, the listeners, that obviously there's no Simon Preston. You might have noticed tonight. That's because he's been called into a last-minute Jamaican Football Federation press conference. He tells us. So unfortunately, Simon's not with us today, but it's going to be myself and Santokie guiding you through the show. So we're going to start off by rounding up some of the latest news, then going into a general discussion, and then wrapping up with questions from you guys, the listeners, to round off the show. So Santokie, have you got anything, any general bits and pieces of news, maybe transfers, to kick us off?
Yes, Nathan. So the first thing which we missed out last week is Kenwyne Jones. So Kenwyne Jones has joined Atlanta in MLS, but that season starts in March 2017. So up until that point, he will go on loan to Central FC in the Trinidad and Tobago Pro League. So he's on a 6-month loan deal back at Central FC, and his first game will be a CONCACAF Champions League game, I believe, next week.
Yeah, I think it's this Tuesday
Yeah.
night.
So what do you make of that signing, Nathan? Do you think it's a good boost for the league?
Yeah, I was saying on Twitter that I think it's a real coup. It's a good move for both parties. I think for Kenwyne to get some game time in a familiar environment before he moves officially to Atlanta in January, I believe, and also for Central to have a player of that caliber in their squad. It will certainly boost them for their CONCACAF Champions League campaign. As you said, starts on Tuesday. And I think also, obviously, Kenwyne, Soca Warriors captain, lots of experience, having played in the Premier League in England. His experience will help the others at Central. So that's of Willis Plaza, Dwight Quintero, players that are playing up front at Central. They can really learn off him. So I think all in all, that's a good move. As well as Kenwyne Jones, there's also Giles Barnes as well, isn't there, who's moved to another MLS club.
Yeah, Giles Barnes, he's moved to Vancouver Whitecaps, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. From Houston Dynamo. It's interesting because I know he was skipper at Houston Dynamo. So I'm not sure whether he'll again have a leadership role at Vancouver. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does there. And then also Stephen Langiel as well. Some listeners might have heard of from Martinique. He has joined Legia Warsaw in Poland, and I've been told that he becomes the first Martinique player to play in Polish football. So a bit of pub trivia. Yeah, a bit of pub trivia for you there. So they're three sort of main signings regarding Caribbean footballers. Some other news to tell you about: the Under-13 CONCACAF Champions League. That's just wrapped up. Harborview and Sandran Jablater are the Caribbean representatives, as we touched on last week. Harborview finished at the group stage, and Sandran Jablater moved on to the quarterfinals on goal difference. Unfortunately, they lost to a Guatemalan side in the quarterfinals, but well done to both of them. So it's a good experience. Have you got anything else, Santokie?
I was just going to point out, isn't San Juan Jablater, they've also qualified for the senior CFU championships next year, I believe. They finished second in the Trinidad Pro League.
Oh, okay, behind
Central.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because usually in Trinidad it tends to be W Connection and Central who've got like a monopoly, but San Juan have qualified, so maybe there's something going on internally which has boosted the progress of both the youth and senior teams.
Yeah, definitely. I know Terry Fenwick, the former England international. He used to manage San Juan, so maybe he's left some kind of legacy there, which they're building on. But yeah, it'd be good to see. Be good to see how they get on in the CFU Club Championship. Other bits of news: Haiti under-23s. They played Argentina's under-23s last Sunday in Miami. Just a friendly match, and they lost 3-1. The captain Charles Harold Jr. scored. So yeah, that was I guess quite a good opportunity, not only in a football sense but also in a financial sense, because we've just discussed the diaspora in Miami. So I'm guessing quite a few Haitian fans turned out for that one. and that was to give Argentina some warm-up ahead of Rio. And Puerto Rico, Santokie, I know we were discussing off air. You wanted to talk about Puerto Rico, Boricua, and something that's going on with them regarding a possible friendly.
Yeah, so this is quite a long story. So the All India Football Federation, so the National Football Federation for India, they had planned to travel to the USA and do a tour, play a few MLS teams. And in a media release today, they said they were in discussions with Guyana to play an international friendly during the August FIFA window. Unfortunately, the Indian players could not get visas in time, so that tour's been scrapped. But the federation did today announce that they are hoping to play Puerto Rico in India on September the 4th, which is also during a FIFA international window. So I believe it will be the first time a Caribbean team does travel to India if they do play, and it will be a massive experience for the Puerto Rican players ahead of their Caribbean Cup qualifiers in October. India, incidentally, they've traveled the Caribbean before. They played Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana in 2011. They lost 3-0 to Trinidad and then 2-1 to Guyana in Guyana. Historically, the reason why they did go to Trinidad and Guyana is because there's a large population of Indian diaspora in those countries. So they usually, in cricket, they tend to tour those countries, and in the football, they went on a tour as well for those reasons. So yeah, India does have a small link with Caribbean teams, and so it'll be very interesting to see if Puerto Rico do accept their offer.
I think it's always good for Caribbean nations to play non-Caribbean opposition as well when they can, when the opportunity comes about, just to see how they cope against different opposition. On the subject of Puerto Rico, they have, I think it was yesterday, just appointed a new head coach / technical director, Carlos Garcia Cantarero, who used to be Atletico Madrid B team manager. So he's just been appointed, and the reason is because Jack Stefanowski, the goalkeeping coach of Puerto Rico FC, he's got too committed really to Puerto Rico FC, so he was unable to continue as national coach. So Carlos Garcia Cantarero is coming on an interim basis, and yeah, I imagine that if that friendly is finalised, he'll be in charge for that, but definitely in charge of the Caribbean Cup games in October. So I also read that he had some kind of involvement with Fernando Torres, development at Atletico Madrid. So yeah, make of that what you will. Yeah. So yeah, we've talked a little bit about latest news. I also wanted to say as well that the Dominican Republic, they've got professional league. Their playoffs are next Saturday, so this Saturday coming. And the 4 clubs are Barcelona, Cibao, Pantoja, and San Cristobal. So they're going to be playing in the playoffs to determine the overall champion of the LDF in the Dominican Republic. So yeah, I think it's been going since March 2015. And I know that it's got a lot of publicity. The Dominican Republic Professional League.
Sorry, to go on the topic of domestic leagues, the Guyana Football Federation announced this week that they have no idea when the Elite League season will start. It's believed it will start sometime around late September, but there's no official date yet. Officially, the transfer window, which is possibly the least publicized transfer window of all time, ends tomorrow. So clubs in Guyana do need to sign players without giving them a date as to when the league starts, which isn't ideal.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if does the CONCACAF club licensing system help in that regard at all?
Yeah, I believe they do get training in regards to transfers. So they have they use a transfer system, management system, and it especially helps with international transfers, because there was a lot of problems last season or in the inaugural elite season with players coming in from abroad and not having the right licensing to play in the league. So I believe they did receive a CONCACAF workshop over the summer. In regards to that, Coach Shabazz has expressed concern on social media about how this will affect the national team. If there's no league until late September, that only gives local best players, about a week of match practice before they face Jamaica in possibly Guyana's biggest game in their history, because it could essentially be a Gold Cup playoff.
Yeah. Hopefully the dates can get sorted. It just made me think, actually. Make sure, listeners, you log on to www.homeofcaribbeanfootball.com to read Santokie's review of last season's Guyana Elite League. There's plenty of stuff there to read. Santokie, I know that you wanted to touch on the Cayman Islands and a story that I recently put up, which is quite a fascinating story, really.
Mm.
just delving into that.
Yeah, so Nathan wrote a brilliant article as usual on his blog homeofcaribbeanfootball.com. It was regarding a story in 2002 when Cayman Islands launched an ambitious plan to recruit British players into their national team. Now the catch here is, whereas Caribbean teams have done that recently, more times in recent times, this one, Cayman Islands were hoping to attract players with no actual link to the Cayman Islands, so no heritage or no residency in the Cayman Islands, on the basis that as a British overseas territory, they were in their rights to recruit British-born players to their team. Unfortunately, and pretty expectantly, FIFA said no, they could not bring the players over, and that kind of scrapped their ambitious plan. But I did find it was an interesting part of Caribbean football history. Nathan, do you want to expand on your article?
Yeah, so you've kind of wrapped up in a nutshell, but I mean, my opinion really is that if you're going to play for a country at international level, you really need to have some kind of genuine connection, whether that be you're born, take the Cayman Islands, you're born in the Cayman Islands, you're of Caymanian ancestry, or you're a 5-year resident. That is the umbrella of FIFA eligibility. And I think what they were trying to do really, the CIFA, were exploit a little bit of a loophole back in 2002 to essentially call up any player, as you said, as a British passport that hasn't represented a British country. I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, because if you actually step back, as I say in the article, and you imagine the potential player pool for all the British overseas territories, Montserrat, Anguilla, British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, and have a look at the players that they could call upon, it would be pretty mental. And you'd have thousands and thousands of potential call-ups. So, yeah, I mean, I admire the Cayman Islands trying to utilise players overseas to bolster their team, but there's a certain way of going about it. I mean, the 8 players were, some of them were Barry Hales, who was reasonably high profile at the time, wanted to play for Jamaica. Wayne Allison, who was the captain of Tranmere. Who else was there? Martin O'Connor from Birmingham City. So decent enough players.
Yeah.
And of course, you can't really blame them for accepting the call-up, because you would, to be given the opportunity to become an international footballer. And of course,
I believe, Nathan, did you say they actually flew out to the Cayman Islands as well as part of the process?
So they flew out. They Wayne Allison didn't. He held back because of the game against Portsmouth, a league game. But the 7 of them, they flew out. They played a friendly against DC United and lost. I think it was 5-1 or 5-0. Obviously, they're all really excited about playing in a World Cup qualifier, ready to travel to Havana to face Cuba in the first leg of 2002 World Cup qualification. Then FIFA interjects. But what I can't understand is, why didn't FIFA clear up this eligibility criteria at the start and only come in later on to then tell the likes of Barry Hales, etc., that they couldn't play?
I think it could be when you're entering a World Cup qualifier and you officially have to enter players' details to FIFA right before the game, 24 hours before the game. And I think that's only when FIFA kind of are alerted to the situation. So, because it's happened with John Bostock at Trinidad and Matthew Briggs at Guyana. So it's only once the game is on the horizon and the paperwork's been officially submitted, then FIFA alert signals seem to go off, which is quite unfair on the teams, because they obviously spend money to fly the players in, believing they're eligible. But I guess FIFA has such a wide scope of issues to cover. They're not really focused on specific smaller islands, which is a shame.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the whole thing was pretty much a waste of time in the end, which was a shame. But Barry McIntosh, who I referenced, Jamaican-born British agent, he was hired by the CIFA to get in contact with the players. But he was comparing what they were doing at Cayman Islands to Jamaica with English players and Puerto Rico with American players. But that is a little bit different, because the likes of Jason Hernandez, Manolo Sanchez, Carlos Clark, that have been called, Jeremy Hall, that have been called up by Puerto Rico, they've obviously got Puerto Rican family heritage. So it's not just like you're calling up any American player that hasn't represented America. And then obviously the likes of Frank Sinclair and Darryl Powell, etc., Robbie Earl that play for Jamaica, they're also 2nd and 3rd generation immigrants. So in a nutshell, I just think, I don't like you, but I just think there needs to be a connection, some kind of connection.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, whether you have one grandparent born in the country or something, you just need a tangible connection to just link you to that island. Otherwise, you're essentially a mercenary, and it kind of reduces international football to club football.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Also, just to round off on this, Jeffrey Webb was the president of the Cayman Islands FA at that point, and also Kostas Takas.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, who was also arrested on corruption charges back in May 2015. Those two were involved. Obviously, it's not directly linked. I just thought that was quite interesting.
was Jeffrey Webb president of the Cayman Islands FA during this recruitment process, or was it before his time?
No, he was. He was president of the. That's what I read. He was president at the time. I think he was contacted. I can't remember. I think I read in the Guardian he was contacted, but he was quite sort of brash about it and refused to comment on what they were doing at the time.
Okay.
But yeah, I assume he would have been involved in getting them flown over and
yeah.
You know, it's an admirable idea, but there's a certain way of going about it. I know that Montserrat, another British overseas territory, like as I say, their whole national team is pretty much built on British-born players. But those players like Lyle Taylor and Dee Morgan and Dee Mason, they all have Montserratian heritage. So again, you know, it makes sense.
If any of our viewers are into reading great football books, there's one by James Montague, 31-0. The opening chapter is about Montserrat and how they recruited players from Hackney Marshes in London, just calling on anyone who has any link to Montserrat to play for their team. So it's quite interesting perspective on how teams do recruit for them.
Yeah, very interesting, very interesting. I mean, it's an island of around 5,000 population, and I think I've talked about it before. I'm sure some of you know that the 1995 Soufriere Hills volcano, that obviously forced a lot of people from Montserrat to England, and then they settled down there with families, and they've been able to recruit from there. As good as that is, I know they ran Curacao quite close and work at qualifying. I would like to see maybe some Montserratian born players coming up and making a name for themselves instead of just all British-born players. And I know there's a guy called Pascal Schmidt, I think it is, who's a really good source for all things Montserratian football. Go and check out his Facebook page, Montserrat Soccer News. He has been telling me that they do grassroots coaching for kids there, and they've got a new facility helped by with FIFA, and they do that sort of 4 or 5 times a week. So clearly they're doing some work there. So yeah, we're going to move on to some questions, if that's all right. Sent in by various listeners. I say every week we ask you guys to send in questions, anything that you want to get off your chest, any inquiries, do our best to answer them. Some really good ones so far on the likes of Suriname and the dual citizenship, that kind of thing. So I've got one here sent in by Jason. With their recent climb, do you see St Kitts and Nevis as a legitimate Gold Cup team should they qualify in October? That's qualify for the Gold Cup. We have had a question on St Kitts and Nevis previously. We have touched on them. But I suppose that's looking at it at a slightly different angle. And kind of hypothetically, if St Kitts and Nevis were to get to the Gold Cup, how do you think they would fare, Santokie? Would they be humiliated, do you think, going on what you've seen so far?
Unfortunately, whilst I think St Kitts are one of the strongest teams in CFU at the present moment, they haven't conceded a goal in 2016. They're playing friendlies in Europe. They're playing Nicaragua next month, and they've also got a group in the Caribbean Cup, Haiti and French Guiana, which they could win if they can catch Haiti off guard. I do think the transition to the Gold Cup, which we've discussed before, is far too much for them at this stage, and they would essentially become whipping boys should they play the likes of USA, Mexico, El Salvador. Nathan, your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned the Nicaragua friendly, which is scheduled for next month, because I think that'll give us a little bit of an indication, an insight into how they fare against Central American opposition. That game is going to be played in Managua in Nicaragua, so the heat and the general environment, how will they cope with that? They did play El Salvador in World Cup qualifying last year, drew the first leg and then lost quite heavily in the second leg.
Yeah.
So obviously we won't know definitively until it actually happened, but the coach, Jacques Passy, seems to have struck a nice balance between domestic-based and overseas-based players. I just think they're a really growing team. really growing team. And
Yeah.
I think I'd be really personally fascinated to see how they do. I think USA, Mexico, yeah, they're too far away. I think at the moment, Jamaica, they're too far away. El Salvador, Belize, if they were to qualify. I'm just thinking who else. Sort of kind of similar Caribbean teams to their level, like Puerto Rico. I think they might raise a few eyebrows. But yeah, I mean they've got a nice balance, as I say, like Javine Blanchette and Kimiara Rogers from the domestic league, and then the likes of Romain Sawyers, Lois Maynard, Zeph Thomas, Harry Paniutu. So yeah, I know that they're playing Estonia also later this November, because they did play Estonia and Andorra last November. They're playing them again this time in St Kitts.
I think yeah, what you've touched on, there does seem to be a positive camp in St Kitts. They're playing a lot of friendlies. They've got a nice bunch of local-based players, and then they've also got overseas-based players, and they do seem to be developing as a team. I think a problem with a lot of Caribbean teams is what they tend to do is before a tournament, Caribbean Cup or World Cup qualifiers, they tend to just fly in as many overseas-based players as they can, which improves the quality of the team, but it also reduces the spirit of the team when you've got so many overseas-based players, whereas St Kitts seems to have struck a nice balance, which I think is a positive step.
Yeah, and they all talk to each other as well. Atiba Harris was saying they all talk to each other outside, not just when they're playing, but there seems a nice camaraderie, as you touched on. So yeah, thank you to Jason for that question. Be interesting to see how they do against Nicaragua. That is, I think, the 31st of August.
Yeah.
For that friendly,
which is a FIFA window, so they should be able to draw upon the likes of Atiba Harris, Romain Sawyers, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So that'll be good. Should CONCACAF or the CFU fund all travel costs for the Caribbean Cup? That's from Raphael. So this is kind of referencing FIFA President Gianni Infantino's manifesto. In that, I think in February, he said that there will be significant funding available to the Caribbean member associations to help them with transportation and travel to when they play the likes of the Caribbean Cup games. Whether that will actually come to fruition or not, I'm not too sure. But I know that some member associations voted for Infantino purely on that. Like Suriname, they were big on having that funding, because a lot of member associations don't have the requisite money to be able to fund trips. I know that the CFU had to help out Bermuda for the rearranged fixture against French Guiana last month in the Caribbean Cup. So yeah, I mean, what do you think that the member associations themselves should be paying, the CFU should be paying, or CONCACAF, or what?
Well, it's a tricky one, because FIFA has increased the funding from this year from $250,000 to $1 million. So in theory, member associations should now have the required funds to self-fund themselves in the Caribbean Cup in regards to travel and accommodation. But also, in that regards, if Infantino is willing to cover all the costs, then I'm all for it, because it will benefit the teams in the region by allowing them to spend their FIFA development money on other initiatives which will help boost football in their nations. I do think it is very expensive, though, at the moment for teams to cover their own costs. You have the squad, all the playing staff, flights in the Caribbean are very expensive, and then accommodation on top of that. So if Infantino is willing to cover the costs on behalf of CONCACAF, I think CONCACAF would have to cover the finances, because CFU is not in a great financial state at the moment. So I think if CONCACAF did manage that, it would be great for the region, and you probably see improvements in how countries develop their football programs.
Yeah, I mean, I think FIFA have certainly got enough money to do it. CONCACAF probably have. I mean, ideally, you'd want first of all member association to fund. If they can't do it, I suppose next in line is the CFU. But if the CFU is as cash strapped as has been reported online, I know there was a good World Soccer article on how financially bad their situation is at the moment. If they're not able to, next in line, what CONCACAF? If they're not able to, next in line, FIFA. So
yeah,
I mean, I mentioned the Caribbean Cup. Cuba, when they travelled to play, I think it was French Guiana. I mean, that was just incredible. They had to get boats over from Cuba in the Greater Antilles down to Suriname in South America, sleep on the floor of some dodgy hotel, I think I was reading, and then get transportation to French Guiana to play that game, and they ended up losing 3-0.
Yeah,
So
it's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy. It needs to be sorted out. On the subject of, sorry, go on.
Yes, I would like to know like a general ballpark figure for how much it does cost member association, for instance, Cuba to play Suriname, how much they do have to spend on travel and accommodation. I know the Guyana Football Federation president, Wayne Ford, said last week to enter the under-13 girls into the tournament, into the CONCACAF tournament in America, under 15, it would cost around $80,000 for the federation just to cover that. So I'd imagine the senior men's team would cost maybe 2-3 times more of that.
Yeah, that's a good estimation. I mean, I'm pretty sure for the Bermuda French Guiana rearranged fixture last month, Bermuda asked for $60,000 from the CFU.
Okay.
That was to get themselves, obviously, all the players, all the delegation, the accommodation.
And then don't forget, if you've got overseas players, then you have to fly them in as well from England or USA, so that adds to the costs as well. So yeah, it is quite, and also most countries in the Caribbean, from what I've seen, they don't generate match day ticket revenue, or they obviously don't, or revenues from television, which a lot of European and the rest of the world do. So they are losing money in that regards, and then having to spend money on travel as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when you see the occasional banners put out by various Caribbean member associations, they can range really. I know some of them can be like 10 Eastern Caribbean dollars to go to a game, which is what, sort of 5-6 quid in England, something like that. But then others can be a lot more expensive. But I don't think.
I mean, from what I've seen on streams, there's never really packed stadiums. It's kind of like playing in an empty school setting. So I mean, I'm guessing they don't generate enough from match day revenue. It'll be interesting to know whether that's because there's a lack of interest in football, or whether culturally there's not much of an emphasis on going to live games as there is in, say, Europe.
Yeah, I mean, in Jamaica, the schoolboy football, that's massive. They have pack out like the Independence Park for it.
I was going to say today is the final of Guyana schoolboy football tournament, and they're playing in the national stadium, whereas the elite league, they don't play the final in the national stadium.
Yeah, I don't know, I find it a bit weird. There's this huge emphasis on schoolboy football and secondary schools, more so than domestically. Which is strange coming from an English culture for that to happen. But yeah, so just got one more question to pose, which is from John. What will it take for Cuba to become a major competitor in world football? And when I saw this question, I instantly thought of defections, because there is a glass ceiling effect in Cuban football, such as the communist regime there, that there is no professional football, obviously because of communism. The best players hit a glass ceiling, and then they have to use tournaments like the Gold Cup or the Central American and Caribbean Games, whether that's held, to defect. The national team then no longer wants them. So that, Cuba have ultimately lost players like Osvaldo Alonso, Rodoni Alvarez, Lester Moure, recently Ariel Martinez, Jorge Luis Corrales. These sort of players, they've lost them, really good players, because of defections. So I guess that political situation is so ingrained that it is to the detriment of the country's football.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I'd say defections was essentially the central thing holding them back. I mean, at the moment, in terms of looking to dominate world football, they have to go back and start to dominate Caribbean football, because they've had an awful last 18 months. I'd say 2015 was probably the worst possible year they could have. I think they conceded 15 goals in their Gold Cup, the 4 Gold Cup matches they played. They lost 4 out of their 5 friendlies, were eliminated to Curacao in the World Cup qualifiers, and they've continued that bad run this year by being eliminated from the Caribbean Cup qualifiers in the first round. So it has been a dreadful year. So they are in a rebuilding phase, which is going to be made harder with the possibility of defections. So you never have a settled team, essentially.
I know the Gold Cup last year, they had they couldn't field any substitutes for one of the games.
I'm not sure if the defections issue could improve as the political situation in Cuba. I mean, I know they're playing America in October, I believe, in Havana.
The first time in 47 years.
So if we see such headway being made in that regards, maybe the defections will end in the future. But for now, it's the short-term problem. It's a massive problem. Arguably the biggest problem a team has to face in the world.
Yeah, I mean, having said that though, having talked about the defections, I think they still do quite well, given the situation. I mean, the first Caribbean nation to qualify for the World Cup back in 1938. The under-20 team qualified for the 2013 under-20 World Cup. They had a really nice generation of players. So, you know, despite the defections, they still seem to produce a lot of really talented players with a never say die attitude. That's something I always associate with Cuban footballers.
They're essentially like a selling club in the Premier League. They always know that they're not going to have this team for the next few years. It's always a rebuilding process with them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's some really nice players like Michael Reyes. I don't know if you've heard of him, but if he was to go to MLS, I'm convinced that he'd do a really good job. But it's just a shame that they're held back by this political communist situation. But yeah, hopefully they pick up soon, because they've had a pretty dreadful sort of last 18 months, 2 years, to be honest. Have you got any questions at all, or is that pretty much?
That was it. That was pretty much it on my side. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, just thinking to conclude the show. I'm just going to ask Santokie, have you got any sort of work, any articles that you've written recently that you'd like to plug, or any projects that you've got coming up to tell the listeners about?
I guess on Nathan's website, the Home of Caribbean Football, please check out my season review of the Guyanese Elite League, because it does give you a good summary of Guyana's first inaugural domestic league, and will give you insight into local-based players who aren't covered much in the media as many of their counterparts who are based internationally. Yeah,
definitely give that a read. Also, I've put out just quite a short under-17/under-20 World Cup qualifying recap today, just listing all the scores and going through some analysis regarding the players and what each team did. So do go and check out that if you can. The next two shows, it's worth telling you, Monday the 8th of August and the 15th of August. Simon is also going to be absent. So it's me and Santokie playing up front, two-man partnership up front. So yeah, Simon is on holiday, so he's not going to be around on Caribbean Football Weekly, but we are hoping to get on two guests. We'll keep you updated on that. Nothing's set in stone at the moment, but we're hoping to line up a couple of good guests and bring you some insight from them. Hopefully, kind of a player and somebody working, inside Caribbean football. So stay tuned for that. Until next time, thank you for watching. Do remember to subscribe to Reggae Boys Commentary if you haven't already. I think Simon's just hit something like 400 subscribers, which is really good. So yeah, keep promoting it. Santokie, got anything else to say before we wrap up for episode 5?
No, just hope all our viewers have a great weekend and a great week ahead. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Definitely. All right, guys. Peace out. Bye.